Thanks so much to all my patrons. Join now to help support the channel and help pick the books I review on this channel. Link in the description. And I am done. Okay, so I just got finished listening to The Trouble with Peace. This is book 2 in the Age of Madness trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing this book, which was literally just right now. So, this is a hard book for me to recommend for people to read because it will make a lot of other books not good anymore. It's that much better than pretty much anything in the grim dark subgenre. It'll just ruin a lot of things for you. So this is so dang good. This is my second time reading this book. I read it like 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, whenever it came out. I read it day one when it came out. And, well, no, maybe not. I read the book 3 the day when it came out. I was still catching up when this one came out. So I read this like 2 or 3 years ago, and I loved it. But I didn't love it as much as 2 of the other books in the series. I did not love it as much as the final book in the original First Law trilogy, and I did not love it as much as the final book in the Age of Madness trilogy. Quick recap for those of you not in the know. The First Law is a 10-book series. You've got a trilogy of 3 books called the First Law trilogy. Then you've got 3 standalones. Then you have this one, The Age of Madness, which is the 3-book trilogy. And then you've got a book of short stories that a lot of people don't really include in the mix because you can take it or leave it. But yeah, this was, I think, my 3rd favorite book, maybe 3rd, maybe even 4th when I originally read it. But I've read, on my reread, the trilogy, the 3 standalones, and now 2 of the Age of Madness, and this is hands down my favorite one of the group. I don't know what I missed about this the first time I read it. I loved it. I feel like it was, when I did my list of top favorite books of all time, like a top 100 list, this was, I don't know, in the 30s or so, and that's really high for a guy that's read hundreds of fantasy books. But that was way too low. I mean, this is, head and shoulders above the pack. So I don't know what I missed about it the first time I read it. It's a perfect book, and that's hard to achieve, and it's crazy. I mean, well, maybe it's not perfect. There's things that I liked about the first trilogy more than this trilogy, but as a whole, I certainly like the second trilogy more, and I love the first one. I feel like the second trilogy doesn't have any of those truly iconic characters that are beloved by everybody as a point of view character, as the first series does with 𝐒𝐲𝐿 and Logan. And I maintain that those POVs are the best. And maybe if I read this book in physical format instead of doing audiobook, I might feel differently. But I can say definitively that the audio performance of 𝐒𝐲𝐿 and Logan are perfection. And the performance in this book, while Stephen Pacey is the greatest of all time, in my opinion, in his performance of this First Law world, there wasn't enough that really identified them in these really particular ways of these POV characters in this next trilogy to allow that performance to come out like the first trilogy. So, but again, maybe I'd feel differently if I didn't listen to this, and I could just fill it in the blanks in my head. And one of the POVs in this trilogy, Gunnar Broad, I find a bit weaker than the other ones, but that's it. That's the only qualms I have with this book in the slightest. Everything else is literal perfection. The drama that goes down in this book is so intense. The battle sequences that happen in this, or the big battle that happens here, is far and away better than anything else in this series. And I'm including the heroes, which is essentially a book of a big battle that takes place over several days. And I found this one to be even better than that one, which probably not a popular opinion, but it was more succinct than that whole book dedicated to it, but very lengthy. And not to go off on a diatribe, but that's kind of what this channel's all about, because I don't script out anything. I was trying to figure out what makes Joe Abercrombie's battle writing so wonderful. There's a lot of people that say Joe Abercrombie's the best writer of battle sequences in all of fantasy. And while I think that title should go to John Gwynne, for the way that John Gwynne lays tactically out the battles and the sequence of events that happens in those battles. When I was reading this one, or listening to this one, whatever you want to say, I was trying to really figure out what it is about Abercrombie that I love so much, where I view him as, among the greatest of the great. And it's not so much the order of battle and what's going up against who and the vivid descriptions of people killing each other. It's the human interactions during these battles that really sets him apart. Because Abercrombie is truly, truly at the top of the game when it comes to dialogue. And the dialogue that goes on in these battles feels reminiscent of the way real life should be. And I say feel because I've never been in anything close to that. I've never been in a fist fight, so I can't even get close to telling you what an actual battle would be like and the stress of it. But it just makes you feel like you're there, and it can inject some levity into the situation, some like gallows humor into it, that I know for a fact, based on reading a lot of history. There's a lot of instances in World War II and even World War I. And I'm sure tons of other wars in human history where people found this dark humor, extremely dark humor, as particularly funny. And there's something in the mentality of humans that latch on to that style of humor among adversity that allows them to try to cope with it. And I think Abercrombie has nailed that. But yeah, the battles in this were just wonderful. And the fact that this feels like, definitively in my mind, the greatest middle book to a trilogy that's ever been written. That this feels like a self-contained book in the sense that most second books in a trilogy struggle. There's something called middle book syndrome that describes it, where it's very, very difficult for an author, I imagine. I'm not an author, but I can't imagine how hard it would be to write a second book in a trilogy, because you don't get the courtesy of being able to spend a lot of time setting up the story, which sucks up a lot of page. You have to pick it up and run with it, but you can't finish it. You have to end somewhere that leaves the reader hanging. And a lot of times when you read a second book, you end up with this feeling of emptiness at the end. And you're like, it was good, but I'm left wanting. And that's not the case here. I mean, Abercrombie wrote it, and I hate to keep using this word because I'm sure there's other words that can describe this, but he wrote it in a perfect way, where it ends a structure to the story. Something very definitively gets accomplished. And you get some closure to the major conflict that you feel like is going on. And so it feels like the end of a trilogy. But then at the very end, he's like, oh, wait, but there's more. And the wait, there's more doesn't feel like it's thrown in just as like a groaner. Like, oh, okay, you're just trying to trick me at the end. Okay, which I've read that before, certainly. This feels like it's earned. You hear what's going on and how this third book clearly is going to go. And you go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And oh yeah, now that makes sense. Now I very clearly see the direction that this third book's going to go. I thoroughly, thoroughly love the dynamic between the opposing sides in this one as well. And the leaders of the central conflict here, I don't even want to say who it is, because if you haven't read this yet, I feel like there's some mystery that would be ruined for you if I even told you who's against who. And so to not put spoilers out there, I will just say that the dynamic between these two sides, in particular the leaders of these two sides, and the person that ties these two sides together, and if you've read this book, I think you know what I'm talking about. There's a character that starts kind of on one side and kind of floats to the other one, is magical. Because you end up in a great scenario, which Abercrombie is very good at doing, where you feel sympathy for both. You understand the perspective of both. You also can totally disagree with both, because humans are fallible. The more you get to know them, the more fallible they are. And a lot of times in the leaders that we have, and I know this intimately because I work in politics, I have met every major politician that works in the state of California many times. And the allure of these people have gone away for me. I see them as real people. And I don't have any sort of like, oh, wow, the governor, or, oh, wow, this person. They're normal people. And they're extremely fallible people. And because that's how humans are, right? And nobody's perfect, especially people that are in positions of power. Power can corrupt. And it's hard to find somebody that's legitimately a truly wonderful, perfect person that would ever want to be in charge of anything. I feel like the people that are like the most perfect people in the world are those that are content with life and raising a family and just being happy and, just focusing on the things that are truly the most important in life instead of being in charge of other people and trying to impose your power on them. But Abercrombie writes these characters in this such wonderful way that shows all these different sides of them, but doesn't take the bait and make these leaders evil and with these truly nefarious purposes. No, they believe they're right, and they have great points. They're also idiots. They're also, vindictive and selfish, and all these negative human traits that would be hard not to be if you're in their scenario. And it's easy to say you wouldn't, but it would be very easy to slip into it as well. So just truly, truly wonderfully done. I find that the more I was reading this and the more getting involved in it, and even knowing how things went, I just couldn't wait to watch these dynamics happen. There's a scene that happens towards the end of this book where I'm almost like yelling at one of the characters for making a horrible decision. And upon first reading, thinking, what a wonderful decision. What a truly kind and wonderful thing for somebody to do. Forgiveness and these wonderful human traits. And what that can do to you in the long run when applied in this geopolitical scenario with cutthroat politics. And it's just great. This series is just, it's made for a reread. Some series are made for a reread, and this isn't in the Malazan sense, where I'm rereading Malazan right now, and the book is just filled, the first Malazan book is just filled with these nuggets that make sense now. Everything made sense the first time in the first law. But now you're seeing these decisions that are being made on the human level, and knowing how they will come out later. And it makes you see things from a totally different light. And that's just that's great writing. That's great planning and great execution from Abercrombie. The new characters that have been introduced in this series, I didn't think could be done as well as they were. Now, I mentioned earlier on in the video that I thought a couple of the characters were better than the other characters in this book, but the average point of view character is better in this series than the first one, in my opinion. They're great. I don't know how Abercrombie keeps doing this, how he keeps coming up with these characters that are so dang compelling. And you want them to win and want them to lose at the same time. And it just pulls at all these different emotions from you. It's a masterpiece. And this is not a series you want to read as your first fantasy series. This is not a series you want to read as your 10th fantasy series. This is one of those things you should save. And I'm jealous of people that have held off from reading this series for a long time so that they can really, really enjoy it when compared to other things. Because alternatively, you'll read this early and then it'll just ruin a lot of future reads that you're going to do. So yeah, don't read this if you have not read a ton of fantasy, because you'll like it too much and it will hurt you in the long run. And I'm not, that seems like a fun, kind of funny thing to say. It's the truth. I'm saying it because it's the truth. And, I wish I didn't read this series as early as I did. I did the thing I think a lot of people do where they want to get through the greatest hits in fantasy. So they go and look at lists and, this one shows up on all of them. So does Stormlight Archive and Malazan and, these mega titles. But, there's something to be said about saving the good stuff until later on. And this would definitely qualify as the good stuff. And when compared to grimdark fantasy, it's the best stuff. And obviously grimdark is a very specific niche of fantasy, but yeah, it's wonderful. And the audiobook narration is just to die for. To die for. It might even be better to read this and then save the audio for a reread so you can see a different perspective on it. And I don't know, but I'll always read these things on audio because it's just perfect. So without going and just saying the same things over and over about how gushing in love with this I am, I cannot wait to read the final book in the series. Chances are I'm going to read that one and go, that's the best one, because I keep feeling this way in these Abercrombie books, because I just feel like he gets better and better as a writer. And That's crazy when he already started out so well. And I can't wait to read The Devils, which is a totally different book from a totally different series that's going to come out next year. Apparently, he's already done with it. And so he's sending out some e-arcs, maybe like real arcs to people, advanced reader copies. And I'm trying real hard to get my hands on one because I just can't wait. So that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching this gushing review. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all of my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Gil, Gregory, JD, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝗏𝗏𝗏, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tay C, Tahir, Tommy, Zion, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Joe UK, Kat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Philippe, Sky, and Wacky. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.